focus on the stumbling blocks because those are the things that we need to remove to get to the good stuff, right? And when we talk about autism and the stumbling blocks that come with education, we are almost always talking about challenging behaviors. That there will be things that will crop up in the classroom. And by the way, as a former teacher, I want to remind everybody, it's not always the kids who are on the autism spectrum that are engaging in the challenging behavior. So we've put together a presentation for you, and we've done it before on the show, but it's been a really long time, that talks about dealing with challenging behavior, and it is not autism specific. So I know from having been in a classroom that if you have a young person of any age and any skill ability who is engaging in challenging behavior, you need tools, right? And so that's what we want to talk about. So this is called Dealing with Challenging Behaviors in the Classroom. I just wanted to give that precursor because, you know, there are lots of good things that happen, but we're focusing on the tough stuff today. Okay, so my first question for you is, why aren't you Superman? And why aren't our teachers Superman? Why can't they deal with 37 students in a classroom, 5 who have ADHD, 3 who can't stay in their chairs but don't have a diagnosis of that, 2 kids who have autism, 1 kid who is chewing his pencil eraser, 1 kid who is throwing things at other students, right? Why can't a teacher deal with all of that and educate students? It's ridiculous what we expect of teachers right now. And whenever we're talking with a teacher as a parent of a child with autism, we have to take a step back and ask ourselves, what are these people supposed to be doing? Because the number one thing that they're supposed to be doing is educating our children. But a lot of times that completely goes out the window to deal with challenging behavior. So the whole purpose of this talk is to give us all a toolbox. Because we need tools to be able to get to the good stuff, right? So today's toolkit, we're going to identify the causes of challenging behavior, because guess what? It's not just random, right? We're going to provide basic strategies for dealing with those behaviors. We're going to identify built-in resources within our school system to help with challenging behaviors. And then we're going to give you something better than a cape. And by the way, this is for parents and teachers working together. If you're sitting at home and you're thinking, well, the teacher should just do that, right? I got to tell you, we need to get you a big old whoopee and get you over that idea, because that is not how the school system works anymore. This is a and I don't know that it ever was, honestly. I don't know. But it is a collaboration, and your child's success depends on how well you collaborate with your school at that IEP meeting, and how helpful you are and how realistic you are about what the teacher can actually do. But once you get on that reality page, you'll be amazed at what a teacher can do. Okay, so that's today's toolkit for you. Okay, first we got to talk about behavior, right? Behavior is something that gets us all fatootsed, and we get, oh, he's doing something, he's doing this, and I don't know what to do about it. I've talked before about the fact that when my son was diagnosed with autism, we got kicked out of the YMCA. And they told us we couldn't bring my son back anymore to any activities or the childcare, because every once in a while he was doing this, and one of the girls said, I don't know what that is, and I don't know what that means, and it's freaking me out, who was working in the childcare. Behavior, and we can all roll our eyes and go, what was up with this chick? But the truth of the matter is that we've gotten freaked out by behavior before, right? When our child was in the middle of a tantrum going, I don't know what that is, or we see our kid lining things up and we go, I don't know what that is, right? Teachers get, freaked out about behavior too, especially if you are in charge of 40 lives or 36 lives or 32 lives or 27. If you're in charge of 2 lives and somebody starts engaging in a behavior that takes your focus so you can't watch the other one, you're going to have some emotions about that, right? So it can be really difficult, but we have to go back to lesson number 1, which is that all behavior is communication. They're communicating something. And if you can get your head into that space when somebody is engaging in a behavior, you will take deeper breaths and you will have your higher functioning systems working. So behavior is a means of communication. I love this slide because you look at these kids, right? And if you look at it through that filter, what are they, each and every one of these kids, communicating? Some of them are communicating, I am furious. Some of them are communicating, I'm scared, right? Some, it's all different things. But if we start looking at that, it's much easier to get in there and start doing something. So that's your first filter, is what is being communicated when these behaviors are happening. Okay, logic dictates, and science has proven that behavior is only maintained when it is rewarding in some way. I call this principle number one. That's just my whole thing. We learned this in ABA, that any behavior that keeps happening again and again and again means it got a paycheck, right? At some point, it got something worthwhile. So we want to start asking, just like Dr. Phil says, what's the payoff? What's the paycheck? If you see a kid in a classroom and they're behaving in a certain way, what's the payoff for it if it's happening again and again and again, right? Okay, but there's a little bit of an asterisk here. If we think about this, what if we could pick the behaviors that we want a student to maintain and make them rewarding, and make behaviors that are challenging less rewarding so that they lessen or disappear? This is the thing that Dr. Grampiche always talks about, that, it's as if we've got these two canisters, right? And one of them, we have behaviors that we want to see increase, right? We absolutely do. And we have behaviors that we absolutely want to decrease. Because if we could change the level in the two canisters, how good would our life be? Because as a teacher, the behaviors that you want to increase is someone staying on task, doing their work, paying attention, right? We want them to be able to write their assignments. Whatever the skill level is, for a kindergartner, we want them to be able to sit crisscross applesauce and watch the teacher and respond in unison, right? That's all a part of the lesson plan, right? If we're in 6th grade, we want them to be able to take notes and be watching the teacher and sit in their desk, right? Those are the skills that we want to increase. And there's a bunch more skills that we want to increase. What are the things that we want to decrease? We want to, maybe for a 6th grader, we want to decrease them having disruptive behaviors where they're calling out across the room and talking to their friend and answering a question without raising their hand. Maybe it's the kindergartner that we want to decrease when they kick the student who's next to them because they want them to pay attention to them, or for whatever reason, right? So we're trying to decrease the challenging behaviors and increase the skill level that's appropriate for the child. What if we could do that? What if we could turn it all on its head and make things work? The truth of the matter is we already know how to do that. Science has shown us how to do it. We have the tools to be able to do that. Okay, so we go to ABA, the principles of ABA, it's applied behavior analysis, and we go to the ABCs of behavior. You guys, I talk about this all the time, but we have pretty slides to show it to you today. So remember though, we can only change a child's behavior after we've changed our own. You know who taught me this was Peter Farrig, our first therapist that ever came to our door. He got it from somebody else, but he said this was the light bulb moment for him about ABA, that we can go in and look at a child's challenging behavior, but until we are coming from a point of view of saying, I'm going to change my behavior, we cannot change that child's behavior. Okay, so having said that, it's time for us to really understand what the ABCs are. So the A stands for antecedent. That's what happened before the B. The B is the behavior, and the C is the consequence for the behavior. So, the child comes into class and throws their books on the floor and lays down on the floor and kicks and screams, all right? So something happened. If you think for a second that is just a random behavior, I gotta tell you, adjust your way of thinking, because something happened. We may never be able to figure out what it was, but something happened. Was it that a kid just tripped in the lunchroom and spread their books on the floor and everybody laughed? Is that why this behavior is happening? Or did somebody just say, I'll pay you $5 to trip and throw your books on the floor? Or did the person have a moment where nobody was paying attention? Something happened that led to them throwing their books on the floor. So whatever that thing was that happened before is the antecedent, right? It's the only word in this that we completely have never heard of before. But the antecedent is what happened before. Then the behavior is that they threw their books on the floor of the classroom, right? But here's what's interesting is that now there's going to be a consequence for it. And sometimes we can control consequences, sometimes we can't. But what happens as a result of this behavior? Did the whole class laugh? Did people applaud? I remember being in a college dining hall, and if something got broken, everybody broke into applause, right? Like, people have an interesting way of reacting sometimes. Does the teacher come over and say, oh my gosh, are you hurt? Are you okay? And helps them get up and is very nice to them, kinder than they ever are? Does the teacher yell at the person and say, what is wrong with you? Why can't you walk into a room without throwing your books on the floor, right? Something happens as a consequence. Behavior doesn't happen in a void. There is always a consequence. So here's the dealy wheelie about the ABCs of behavior. You can't control the behavior. Oh, I know, right? It's like, what? I can't control the behavior. We've always been taught that, control the behavior, control your kids, control your students, control the behavior. The truth of the matter is you have very little physical control. Once they're over the age of 4, you can say to somebody, don't do that. But if they don't stop it, this is where we get into problems with the police and people trying to strong arm people, because the truth is we can't really control behavior, right? I've got the serenity prayer here. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. You can't control the behavior. But you can have the serenity to let go of that and say, I cannot control the behavior. And you can have the courage to change your behavior so that you can change the individual's behavior. And you are going to have the wisdom to understand what is the difference, right? Okay, and now my iPad stopped. Okay, so here's the asterisk here. Huge asterisk here, that you have to know what the function of the behavior is. This is when we get into function, what's the function? So the function is that paycheck. What is the thing that's going on? Because if I look at the behavior, the throwing the books on the floor, and I go, well, that's just unacceptable. So I know about antecedents and I know about consequences. So I'm going to change the consequences and I'm going to punish them for having done that behavior. And that means I'm going to give them a talking to. And I'm going to wave my bony finger in their face and I'm going to say, you know what? You can't do this anymore. This is not acceptable. Do you see how upset I am about this? This is not acceptable. You are not doing this anymore. Except, oh my goodness, back up. What if the paycheck for throwing the books on the floor was that the individual wanted attention? You just gave it to them. So are we going to see that behavior go down, or are we going to see that behavior go up? If you just gave somebody their paycheck, you're ensuring that they're going to do it again. So suddenly on Tuesday they come in and you go, I yelled at them for that before. Well, I'm going to yell at them again. It didn't work before, but I'm going to yell at them again. And we see that now we get into a pattern of every week that person's going to come in and throw their books on the floor, and we're yelling at them going, I don't understand this, except that we are feeding the flame, right? So if we don't know what the function of the behavior is, we're very likely going to be in deep doo-doo because we're taking guesses at things. Okay, so there's 4, I call them the 4 usual suspects, the 4 most common functions of a challenging behavior, especially in the classroom. Number 1, to get attention. And remember that even if it's negative attention, that counts as attention. That's the hardest one for us all to remember. Second most usual suspect is access to an activity or to an item. We're going to go into all of these in depth. Third is escape. And then the last one is that there's something about it. We call it self-reinforcing. There's something about it that feels good for them. There's a paycheck just intrinsic in the actual behavior. Okay, so take a look at this broken down car here, right? Imagine for a second that your car breaks down and you're like, I don't know what to do. You call a mechanic, right? Why do you call a mechanic? Because you probably don't know how to diagnose what's wrong with your car. You might know how to fix it, right? You might have taken a class and know, okay, I know how to change a spark plug. I know how to change the oil, but you probably, unless you're a mechanic, don't know how to diagnose what's wrong with the car. Okay, so you take your car in and you say to the mechanic, what do they ask you first? They go, what's it doing? And you go, well, it was making a clunk noise, and then this happened, and steam came out, and and then it stopped working. And the mechanic goes, oh, okay. And then what does the mechanic do? The mechanic starts looking at everything, but the mechanic will try to recreate the problem. Why? Because they want to be able to diagnose what's actually happening. Imagine for a second that you didn't do any of that. Imagine that your car broke down and you went, well, I don't know, but I'm going to decide to change the water pump. I'm just going to, I have this feeling inside that maybe it's the water pump, and I'm not going to describe what happened to the mechanic, and I'm not going to have the mechanic look at it. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to replace the water pump. And so you do, right? And lo and behold, it wasn't the water pump. And you just wasted a bunch of time and money. And worse than that, if it was the brake line, you're running the risk of dying because you decided to take it upon yourself to just randomly decide what was wrong. It's not effective, right? So it's the same thing with when we are looking at the function of a behavior. Don't try to diagnose it yourself. Try to get somebody else to look at the behavior. They're going to ask you what was happening. Tell me all the circumstances. It's called a functional behavior assessment. And they will help you to decide. Let's put this to test with some instances and see if we can figure out what the function of the behavior is on our own, non-experts, right? Johnny is biting Miguel. What's the function of the behavior? I leave it up to you. You tell me. We know what the four usual suspects are. Is Johnny biting for attention? Is Johnny biting to get access to someone or something? Is Johnny biting to escape something? Or is Johnny biting because it feels good? Which one do you think it is? Okay, so it's not okay to guess. It's not okay to guess. Why? Because you need the expert to do it. Just like with your car, you're going to waste time and waste money. Functional behavior assessment done by a board-certified behavior analyst. Do you remember when I said at the beginning we're going to talk about what is available to you at your school? Every single school district is supposed to have at least one board-certified behavior analyst working for them. And if they don't have one, they have to pay to contract one to come in. At any point, in any school here in the United States, if you're getting notes home from the teacher saying your child is doing this and so, feel free to ask in writing for your school district to do a FBA, a functional behavior assessment, so that they can put together a behavior intervention plan based on what the function of the behavior is. The school will assign, they'll have you sign a thing saying that you agree for your child to be assessed for a functional behavior assessment. Make sure it's being done by a board certified behavior analyst. Ask them, who is your BCBA? They will be impressed that you know these terms, and that will be good, right? But they can determine what the function is. So that especially essential when there is injurious behavior involved, whether it's injurious to the child or to someone else. So let's say that the FBA in this case, that Johnny is biting Miguel. Johnny is biting other children and toys on a regular basis. His mother, in this particular instance, reports that this started after he started taking methyl B12 shots. There has also been a recent spike in Johnny's progress in speech. What is the function in this case? And remember that the FBA person comes in and they're like Sherlock Holmes, and they take information. They'll observe Johnny in a circumstance where he's biting. But in this case, the function of the behavior may be that it's self-reinforcing. That we know with methyl B12 shots that some children react by it makes the nerves tingle in their mouth, and that sometimes the feeling of that is alleviated by them biting on things. So we're pretty sure that this is why he is biting. So they create the behavior intervention plan, and Johnny is given some sort of a bite toy, and they make them for kids that are older. Jem had a great necklace that looked like a yin and yang, and he could bite on that because he actually had this. He was chewing on his pencils and things. He wasn't chewing on the kid next to him, but when he had his B12 shots. So for a short period of time, they're going to allow him, while he's adjusting to the B12, to bite on this necklace or a fidget toys. They have things that are on the end of pencils that are safe for them to chew on. And in this way, he stops biting Miguel, and he's able to stay in his classroom and not ostracized from his peers because we knew what the function of the behavior was. Now let's stop for a moment and assume that that wasn't the circumstance. Instead, for this FBA, it comes back that Johnny only bites Miguel, and it's only ever Miguel, and it's only when Miguel is playing with a playground ball. When Johnny bites Miguel, Miguel drops the ball and runs away, leaving Johnny to play with the ball. So what's the function of the behavior for this time? Well, maybe for this one, the BCBA reveals that it's access to an activity or an object. He wants the ball. He bites Miguel. Miguel drops the ball, and he gets the ball. Now, maybe he tried that on Susie, and Susie kicked him back. And so he doesn't bite Susie anymore. He's only biting Miguel because Miguel every time is dropping the ball. So in this instance, it's really important that we learn that we teach Johnny that when he bites Miguel, he never gets the ball. We are going to make sure that, first of all, we're going to protect Miguel and try to make sure that a circumstance happens where Johnny learns how to appropriately ask for a ball, and we're going to give Johnny access to a ball when he appropriately asks for it. But in the event that we mess up and we try to block that Johnny can bite Miguel, right? But if he ever does bite him again, it is swift that ball goes away and that he does not get the reward for it. The reward has been getting, even for 2 seconds, to play with that ball. So the BIP is that Johnny is only given access to the ball when he correctly asks for it, and he has gone a prescribed amount of time without biting. Initially, that may only be seconds. Over time, the length of time is made longer. We're going to try to manipulate the antecedent. Remember, what do we have the courage to take control over? We're going to manipulate the antecedent, teach him how to ask for the ball, and we're going to give him the ball every single time. Like, we might have just a program ball that has Johnny's name on it, and every time he asks for it, he gets to play with it, and no other child gets to play with that until we can get, once we get that functional communication, Johnny's not going to need to bite Miguel anymore, right? All right, imagine for a second that the FBA came back, and in this time, it revealed that Johnny bites Miguel when Miguel is working quietly. When he bites, the teacher comes over and gives Johnny the lecture about not biting the bony finger. And sometimes he's given a time out in a corner of the room. While in time out, other students look and giggle at Johnny. So what's the function of the behavior? In this instance, there's at least an element of attention in all likelihood. He gets the attention from the teacher when he bites Miguel, and if he does enough of it and he gets in timeout, the other kids point at him and giggle at him. Remember that even bad attention is good attention for kids who have an empty bucket. And I gotta say, in a classroom, more often than not, this is the culprit, my friends. The almighty attention right here. And here's the good news about that, is that this is so easy to fix. Oh my goodness, as a teacher, when somebody taught me this and said, they didn't teach me the 4 usual suspects. They taught me a different method, which is identifying which type of kid is which, that's an engaging and challenging behavior. But it's the same thing, just looking at it from a different point of view. And they called these kids the empty buckets. And then in every single classroom, there's at least 5 empty buckets. And what you need to do as a teacher is to get to the child and put something in their bucket before they feel the emptiness. It's like feeding the baby before they're so hungry that they're crying, right? It's what they tell us when we work out, that if you get to the point where you're feeling thirst, you're already dehydrated, so you got to give the water beforehand. Same thing with attention. I can personally attest to this, that when I went into a pretty tough school here in Los Angeles to teach, and I came in after 9/11, and their original teacher had left after 9/11 and said, I can't be here. It's not worth it to be here. And these kids were feeling bereft. And I came in on November 1st, and one of my students, on like my second or third day there, he had been able to get rid of every other teacher that had come in the interim between 9/11 and November 1st by intimidating them and scaring them. And he wanted attention. He wanted people to notice him. And so he would take AA batteries and throw them at the head of the teacher. And I felt it sail past my ear, and he threw it so hard it cracked the blackboard behind me. And I continued with my discussion as if it didn't happen. And that was interesting to him, because I did not give him the paycheck of the attention for it, right? And I did not leave as a matter of, but what I quickly did was found ways to give him attention from the minute he walked in the classroom, and would ask him questions and never gave him a moment. I asked him to be my assistant and to hand out papers and to stay close to me, because I was going to count on him. And I'm proud to say that student, it was the following year, was the student of the month, and justifiably so. You fill those empty buckets and they are fabulous. But important to remember, the big asterisk here is that attention does not have to be positive to be rewarding. Once you get your head around that, you find the way to be there beforehand and give the positive attention. They prefer positive attention, but if all you're offering up is negative attention, they're happy to take it. Okay, so in our last FBA, imagine different circumstances. Johnny bites Miguel every day during the daily math quiz. After he bites Miguel, Johnny is given a timeout. He is sent to sit in the corner and is not able to finish the math quiz. Can you guess what the remaining function behavior is? It's escape. And as adults, we engage in this probably more than any other but by biting Miguel, Johnny knows that he's going to get in trouble and that it's going to get him out of the thing that he's doing. And this happens with little kids, but we'll see this more common with the older kids as well. So our new behavior intervention plan: before each math quiz, Johnny is placed in an isolated desk where he's required to work on the quiz. With escape, we never want to give the escape for the activity, because we're giving the paycheck. However, Johnny is given the ability to take short breaks while working on the quiz. He must answer a prescribed number of questions before breaks. The number of questions is lengthened over time, and Johnny is taught appropriately to request those breaks. And also, we need to be working on math skills in a way that's really rewarding for Johnny, so that he doesn't feel the need to have to escape, right? Because he's so desperate to escape, because he doesn't have the skill level, that he's biting somebody over it. It's just communication. It's dangerous communication, but it's just communication. So there's our lady with her car. She's calling the expert. You call the expert, you ask them to come and diagnose the problem, and then you know what the function of the behavior is so that you can appropriately address it. And you say to yourself, and I still do this, well, do I really need a BCBA? Can I try to do it on my own? Sometimes there are multiple functions and it can get complicated. Like, what if now they are engaging in the behavior, they want to escape from it, but they also get the attention of the teacher. So we want to make sure it has our behavior intervention plan fits the actual function, because if we don't, we're going to waste time, and especially when it's injurious behavior, we could put the child at risk or other children at risk. We never want to we never want to leave it up to chance, right? And if it's something that's minor that's happening and you want to try it yourself to figure out what it is, that's fine. But if it doesn't work, you've got to bail and you've got to get a BCBA. You do need to remember that sometimes there'll be an extinction burst. It's best to be dealing with the BCBA, and schools have them. So why wouldn't you? Ask for the FBA, ask for the BCBA. Okay, do teachers need to be Superman? Do you need to be Superman? We don't count on our teachers to know what the function of the behavior is. That's inappropriate, right? That's going to the hardware store looking for spaghetti and milk, right? This is not going to make sense, right? The teachers are there to teach. The behavior interventionists are the BCBAs. They're board certified. They're there to decide what the plan is, and then the teacher implements it. You need to figure out at your school ask before you need them. Who's the BCBA here? You know, you can use, it actually says CARD e-learning, but the thing that you would want to use here is the Institute for Behavioral Training, which is ibehavioraltraining.com. And you can take data on things as a parent, and you can ask a teacher to take data, and you can ask an aide to take data, but you would never ask the teacher to do the functional behavior assessment. If you're in a pinch, and if you're in another country and you don't have a board certified behavior analyst, there is something in skills that's called the CIFA. And it's the CARD Informal Functional Assessment for Behavior, which will be very useful. But lean into the BCBAs in your school. Super duper important that you need to do that. Okay, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? This is what... Great question, right? None of us are ever going to know the answer to this. But children will start to, we've got a couple of magic X's here. I've got 2 minutes. So a challenging behavior happens and it gets fed, right? And it prevents the skill from happening. If you teach the skill, you will see that the behavior goes down. But in a classroom, sometimes that's going to work, and sometimes we have to deal with a challenging behavior. But we get this magic X on our graphs that when we change up the antecedent and the consequences of these things, we can make the challenging behaviors go down, and it will go up at the same amount that the skill is being acquired. They don't need the challenging behavior. They don't need the communication anymore, the negative communication, to get their needs met.